There are many things that Cliff stood up for that I respect. These are the things I try to fight for. Additionally, Ray Burton is an extremely honorable person. Heavy metal was full of cigarette smoke, hard booze, and guitars screaming in hysterical anger. But there was one man who didn't quite fit in, but was the soul of it all. He wasn't annoying, doesn't party, and has never run after the stage lights. Cliff Burton was that guy with the messy hair, baggy jeans from the 1970s, a philosophy book in his hand, and a bass guitar that looked like it was attached to his body. He showed up like a strange, bright star and then disappeared when he was only 24. Metallica fans will always miss him. But what made this shy, nature-loving outcast who avoided the press become one of the most famous rock stars of all time? What was the story behind that harsh yet beautiful bass sound he made? That music was so powerful that it could stop the world for a moment. Cliff Burton wasn't famous. He was a huge shock. His beautiful, sad, and holy story lives on in every note, every tear, and in the minds of people who used to think rock was more than just sound. There was a life there. Beginnings. On February 10, 1962, Clifford Lee Burton was born in Castro Valley, California. It was a quiet town, and the only sound that bothered him as a child was the piano playing in the living room. Having grown up in a middle-class family that loved books and the arts, Cliff didn't grow up in a noisy or hostile environment. Instead, he grew up with classical music, old poetry books, and a clear sky where he could let his mind run wild. He had an older brother named Scott and a sister named Connie. He was the youngest of 3 children. Things looked calm until the first tragedy happened. The brain tumor that killed Scott happened when he was only 16 years old. Cliff was only 13 years old at the time, and the pain of that loss cut deep into his warm, sensitive heart. No one screamed or fought back. No one else was there but a quiet boy playing his bass guitar as if he were calling out his brother's name. He made a promise to himself right then. I am going to become the best bassist to remember my brother. It really happened. It was an agreement. Cliff did not hang out with friends or play sports like other kids did. Instead, he practiced by himself in his room for hours on end, until his fingers were bleeding. Besides learning the bass, he lived it. He found comfort in music, which turned his pain into beat and let the unspeakable reverberate through the strings. Cliff also really liked classical literature and thought a lot. He understood H.P. You can listen to Lovecraft while listening to Bach and then switch to Black Sabbath without feeling any conflict. He thought that beauty and evil were always present in the world. Perhaps that's why Cliff would go on to be one of the few metal artists whose thunderous bass lines could also be poetic, sad, and classically elegant. His teacher said that he was strange and smart at the same time. In jest, his friends called him an old soul because he always had a book with him and smiled softly, far away, as if the world could never quite reach him. The world could never take away one thing from Cliff, though: his brother's quiet promise and his love of music. That boy had a small, steady flame inside him that would one day set the metal world on fire. Beginners in their careers. When Cliff was a teenager, most of his friends followed popular music trends or rebelled like other teens. Cliff, on the other hand, picked a different path that led straight into the heart of music, in which the bass's deep, powerful notes could tell a whole life story. He learned to play bass not to act, but to express himself. After that, every band Cliff joined had a strange energy that wasn't loud or explosive, but eerie and constant, like a dream you can't wake up from. Cliff started playing with a number of Bay Area bands, such as EZ Street, where he played with Jim Martin, who would later become Faith No More's bassist. However, Cliff didn't start getting noticed as a truly unique and standout bassist until he joined Trauma, a rising metal band. Even from the back of the stage, Cliff stood out because of his long hair, leather jacket, and bass sound that sounded like it came from deep inside the earth. In 1982, James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, 2 members of Metallica, were in the crowd at a Trauma show in Los Angeles. They were tired and disappointed until Cliff's bass roared through the venue. It was different from anything they had heard before. A bass solo with a wah-wah pedal that sounded distorted like a guitar, but was still musically stable and very deep, waking up the whole room. In addition to playing the bass, Cliff made it sound like a soul screaming. Cliff wasn't in a hurry, but James and Lars knew right away that they had to get Cliff into Metallica. In San Francisco, he was happy with his life, close to family, friends, and the music scene he loved. The band Metallica was based in Los Angeles at the time. Cliff had said before that Los Angeles was fake and evil, so he made an impossible request. Metallica members didn't see that coming. In the end, though, they agreed, and that choice changed the band's future for good. Cliff became a full member of Metallica at the end of 1982. After that, the band was no longer just a bunch of young people playing Anglo-American heavy metal songs together. With Cliff, they added a new layer of self-reflection, philosophy, and art that made them stand out from all the other bands of the time. Even though Cliff didn't say much, every arrangement and songwriting idea he gave the group made them rethink how they made music. Although Cliff Burton never tried to stand out, the way he held his bass like a whispered prayer made him so quiet that people couldn't take their eyes off of him. Strong career. When Cliff Burton joined Metallica, things began to change. Not with big words or flashy actions, but with the quiet, one-of-a-kind power of his presence. Stepped in like he was from another world, bringing with him classical knowledge, the soul of a poet, and a bass guitar played as if it were an extension of his own heart. The rest of the band was still going strong with the raw, angry energy of punk and thrash. Metallica's powerful first album, Kill 'Em All, came out in 1983. For Cliff, it was the first time he brought the bass out of the background and into the spotlight. Pulling teeth under anesthesia wasn't just a solo. It was an opening and a statement of purpose for me. These are my stories, and this is how I tell them. Other bands used the bass to back their other instruments, but Cliff turned his bass into a lead instrument by using wah-wah pedals, distortion, and tapping. He made it scream and whisper, sounding both wild and soft. No one else in metal had the guts to do that at the time, and with just one track, changed the way everyone thought about bass. However, Cliff brought more than just skill. With Ride the Lightning, 1984, he started to shape Metallica's sound by using a very thoughtful mind. Cliff, he thought, didn't just play. He offered structures, harmonies, and emotional arcs. Songs like Fade to Black, Creeping Death, and For Whom the Bell Tolls didn't just have metal weight, they had soul. And especially For Whom the Bell Tolls, the bass intro, which was often mistaken for guitar, sounded like a death knell and drew people into a dark, empty world. Not only was this creative, it was also instinctive from someone who saw music as a way to share their spirituality. Cliff got ideas from books, especially Hemingway. They took ideas about life, death, and war and woven them into dark, ominous music, which was something no one else in metal was doing at the time. Cliff certainly improved Metallica's songs. It became more complex, painful, and emotional because he added more layers to it. It happened slowly but completely, like a stream soaking into the ground and changing the whole environment above. Then Cliff released Master of Puppets in 1986. This was the best record he had ever made, and it would be his last full album. Not only was it Metallica's best work, but it was also one of the best metal songs ever. There was a beating heart inside Cliff's anger and sadness. It was strongest in the instrumental Orion, a song without words that said more than any words could. Orion was his musical will, from the loud beginning that sounded like stars clashing to the painful middle where Cliff's bass played like a lost soul looking for home. It was as if he knew this was his last chance to say everything he had been meaning to say. Orion is the best way to understand who Cliff was, according to James Hetfield. You can feel the pain, the loneliness, the pride, and the desire to break free in every bass line, pause, and rumble. The work of an artist who never really fit in with this world, but left one of the greatest marks on it. Metallica got closer to being a big hit by covering for Ozzy Osbourne, getting great reviews, and having fans all over Europe, but Cliff stayed the same quiet person. Never wanted fame or money. He read in the backstage area. He wrote letters to his girlfriend by hand on tour buses. He liked to walk alone and look at nature in his free time. It seemed like he only cared about fame because it meant he could make music that was true to himself. And that's why Cliff Burton was such an important artist, not just for Metallica, but for a whole age. His leadership took metal from being just a form of resistance to exploring deeper ideas and using music as a spiritual experience. Even though everyone else was yelling to be heard, Cliff just played, and everyone finally paid attention. Even though he was only on 3 records, Cliff Burton changed what a bass player does in rock music. The metal world shook when he was gone, not just because they lost a band member, but also because they lost a musician who could make the most haunting beauty out of quiet. Personal life. Cliff Burton had a very different personal life from what most people think of when they think of a rock singer, even though he was in one of the most rebellious and high-energy metal bands of the time. He didn't like to make a fuss and stayed away from the flashy parts of the music business. Cliff was seriously in love with Corinne Lynn, who was his girlfriend during Metallica's rise to fame. People who were close to him said that their relationship was stable and calm. Cliff didn't like big romantic gestures or flashy shows of love, but he always cared for his partner in a quiet, thoughtful way. After he died, Corinne kept to herself a lot, but everyone knew she was heartbroken and never really got over it. She stayed in touch with Cliff's family, who thought of her as an important part of his memory. He was known for being honest and down-to-earth with friends and fellow Metallica members. He was the person in the band who wasn't afraid to speak out when something was wrong, according to James Hetfield. Cliff had clear personal limits, but he wasn't hostile. Unlike many rock artists of the time, he didn't like going to parties and stayed away from the self-destructive lifestyles they lived. He also avoided anything fake or shallow. During his free time, he often read instead of going to private parties. His friends knew he loved J.R.R. Tolkien's books, philosophy, and classic writing. He was also loyal to himself, which showed in the way he dressed. While the other band members started to change how they looked to fit what the crowd wanted, Cliff stuck with his flared jeans, flannel shirts, long, messy hair, and worn-out Converse shoes. Not trying to fit in made him stand out, and he didn't care. Only a few people really knew Cliff well and held him in high regard. You didn't get close to Cliff right away, but once he did, he was honest and true. All of the people who worked with him agreed on one thing. He always put music and his own honesty above everything else. The dreadful accident. Metallica was in the middle of a European tour for Damage Incorporated to promote Master of Puppets on September 27, 1986. At that point in time, their business was at its peak. The band played a show in Stockholm, Sweden, and then took a bus overnight to Copenhagen, Denmark. The roads were wet, and it was very cold. There was a thick fog. Around 6 in the morning, tragic things happened. The tour bus went off the road and flipped over in a field next to the town of Ljungby. When the members of the band woke up from the crash, most of them had only minor injuries. Within the bus, Cliff Burton was not to be found. They were shocked to find that he had been thrown out of a window and pinned under the bus. Some band members, like James Hetfield, ran around the scene calling for help and trying to figure out what had happened. Everything was pointless. Cliff was only 24 years old when he died. It broke my heart to learn that Cliff was only in that bunk because of an easy draw the night before. Heavy metal band Metallica would draw cards every night to see who got which bunk. Cliff got the winning card that night and switched places with Kirk Hammett, who was supposed to be in that spot before. No one could have known that a choice that seemed so small could have such a terrible result. According to the bus driver at first, the car had slipped on black ice. However, Swedish police did not find any clear signs of ice at the scene. There were later reports that the driver might have passed out or lost control, but no one was ever charged. It didn't matter what the exact reason was for the band and their fans. They were too sad to deal with losing someone so soon who was seen as the musical soul of Metallica. Cliff's death not only shocked the band, but also the whole metal community around the world. Many people couldn't believe Cliff, who lived a clear, moderate life and didn't seem to fall into the usual rock star traps, could die in such a normal accident. Cutting short the career of such a bright artist just as it was starting to grow was unfair, cruel, and shockingly quick. After Cliff died, Metallica really thought about breaking up. They decided to keep going, not to replace him, but to honor him, after weeks of destruction. Members of Metallica, including James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and others, have said that Cliff's presence was felt in every aspect of the band after that point. This includes how they thought about music, how serious they were about writing songs, and how they lived their lives and dealt with fame. When Cliff died, his funeral was held in California on October 7, 1986. He was burned at the stake. His ashes were spread in a quiet area close to his home. At the ceremony, the haunting, wordless goodbye piece Orion was played, which was an instrument he helped shape so deeply. Cliff Burton was on only 3 Metallica records, but he had a huge effect on music that goes far beyond that. Cliff brought a very different style to a genre known for aggression and speed. He had masterful technique, thought in terms of classical music, and most importantly, he could use the bass to show deep feeling, which was something that metal bands of that time often missed. Before Cliff, the main job of most metal bassists was to back the rhythm, providing a strong bass, but rarely taking the lead. Cliff was not like that. He turned the bass into a personality-building, free-flowing creative tool that could even be used to lead people emotionally. His technical skill was shown in tracks like Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and especially Orion. They showed that bass could be an important part of a song's arrangement. Cliff had an impact on more than just music. It changed the way metal artists thought about their jobs in the future. David Ellefson of Megadeth, Steve DiGiorgio of Death Testament, and Robert Trujillo, who would later replace Cliff as bassist in Metallica, are just a few of the famous bassists who have said that Cliff was an inspiration, not just for the way he played, but also for the freedom, honesty, and creativity he showed. Even after he died, Cliff's influence kept Metallica going. People saw the song, To Live Is to Die, on the 1988 record Injustice for All as a tribute to him. Cliff wrote a poem that is quoted in the album's notes and is used as the basis for a spoken word section in the song. The album's bass was widely mixed too low, which caused a lot of controversy. However, many people think that this was meant to represent the void Cliff had left behind, a presence that could never be replaced. Cliff was more than just a musician. He became a figure of the uncompromising artist. In a field full of temptation, he chose to live simply, stay true to his ideals, and never change to fit what other people thought of him. That's why Cliff Burton is recognized as more than just a famous rock star, as an artist who stood for something. When Metallica was admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009, Cliff was there with the other original members to be honored. The award was accepted on his behalf by his parents, Ray and Jan Burton. Ray told Cliff that he loved music in a short but moving speech. It was not a job. It was his whole life. And I believe he's still playing somewhere. Those words serve as a lasting truth. Cliff Burton's legacy doesn't lie in what he owned or achieved during his lifetime, but in the way his music continues to resonate, reshaping a genre, inspiring thousands of young musicians, and being remembered not because he tried to be great, but because he simply was. Cliff Burton, never truly gone. Cliff Burton passed away at just 24 years old, but what he left behind didn't end with his funeral. In the years that followed, and still today, his name lives on not just in the memory of Metallica fans, but as a cultural icon within the metal community. He stands as proof that staying true to music and to oneself can outlive a person's lifetime. No one kept that flame alive more faithfully and warmly than Cliff's father, Ray Burton. For many years after Cliff's death, Ray continued to attend music events, fan gatherings, memorials, always ready to speak with anyone who loved his son. Even in old age, he traveled on his own, shook hands with fans, and spoke about Cliff with a calm voice, tinged with pride but never boasting. To fans, Ray wasn't just the father of a legend. He was the guardian of Cliff's spirit, preserving his character in the most genuine and humble way. In 2018, Alameda County, California, where Cliff was born, officially declared February 10th his birthday as Cliff Burton Day. It wasn't marked by fireworks or grand stages, but by fans around the world sharing old songs, memories, photos, and above all, gratitude for an artist who lived and created on his own terms without compromise. That same year, Cliff's family partnered with Castro Valley High School to establish the Cliff Burton Music Scholarship, supporting students passionate about the arts who faced financial hardship. The scholarship didn't require outstanding grades or exceptional talent, just true passion. And that, above all, was what Cliff himself lived for. Beyond official tributes, Cliff Burton's fan community continues to grow worldwide. Tribute videos, Orion covers, and hundreds of heartfelt comments are shared every year on his birthday and the day of his passing. On music forums, is still remembered as an artist who was never truly replaced. Even though Metallica went on to achieve enormous success with other members, Metallica too has never let his name be forgotten. At major performances, Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield often speak of Cliff, pay tribute, and sometimes even perform Orion as a spiritual rite. There's no stone monument built in his honor, But the music he left behind is his immortal gravestone, stronger than any statue. Cliff's death was not just a personal loss for Metallica. It was a symbolic loss for an entire generation of artists. Artists who believed it was possible to live authentically, create without compromise, and leave a mark without ever walking the beaten path. Cliff Burton never tried to become a legend. He didn't seek the spotlight, didn't change himself to please the crowd, and never lived for applause. Yet it was that very simplicity, that unwavering conviction of a man brave enough to live true to his soul, that made him immortal. In a world of music that thrives on noise, Cliff chose calm. In an industry obsessed with glamour, he chose depth. And in a band on the fast track to massive success, Cliff preserved a quiet space for himself, where art could exist in its purest form. He was with Metallica for only 3 years, 3 albums, a brief chapter. But that presence was enough to alter the course of an entire genre, enough for his low, resonant notes to keep echoing, not just in music, but in how future generations understand what truly matters. Authenticity, pride, and an identity that cannot be replaced. Cliff Burton didn't die at 24. He simply stopped there. The rest of him, his melodies, his principles, and that quiet yet enduring inspiration, still lives on in the hearts of millions of music lovers. What are your thoughts on Cliff Burton? A quiet artist whose influences felt so powerfully. What part of his short but profound life moves you, makes you reflect, or resonates with you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe this story deserves to be heard by more people, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to join us in honoring those who lived and burned brightly, if only for a moment, but left behind a light that never fades.